Abigail, a 40-year-old woman who cherished routine and tranquility, had just finished another day at work. She got into her car, a silver model reflecting the last rays of the setting sun, and drove towards home. It was still early. The traffic flowed with surprising ease for that time of day, allowing her to get home faster than usual. As she approached her residence, a calm, tree-lined neighborhood where each house seemed to hold its own stories, Abigail noticed an unexpected figure. A man with an upright posture, wearing a dark suit that contrasted with the softness of twilight, was knocking on her door with quiet persistence. She parked the car with a slight sense of apprehension. Getting out, she approached the stranger, whose serious expression softened into a polite smile upon seeing her. "Good afternoon. Can I help you?" Abigail asked, her voice tinged with curiosity. The man introduced himself promptly. "Good afternoon, ma'am. My name is Oliver Hayes. I'm an attorney representing Mr. Franklin Hayes." His voice was calm, conveying a confidence that left no room for doubt about his sincerity. Abigail furrowed her brow, her mind searching through memories for any mention of a Franklin. "I'm sorry, but I don't know any Franklin. I think you must have the wrong address." "My apologies for the surprise, ma'am. Allow me to clarify," Oliver continued. "Franklin was a distant uncle of yours. Unfortunately, he passed away recently." Abigail felt a pang of surprise. A distant uncle? She tried unsuccessfully to recall any memory of this forgotten relative. "I can't remember him," she confessed, her voice filled with perplexity. "It's understandable," Oliver went on, his tone meant to comfort. "Franklin was always a very private person, distant from other family members. That's why few people knew him well." He paused briefly, as if preparing Abigail for the news he was about to deliver. "I don't want to take up too much of your time, so I'll be direct. As the last living relative on your mother's side, who, as we know, passed away some years ago, Franklin left you an inheritance, a large house in the countryside, situated on a vast piece of land." Abigail could barely process the lawyer's words. A house? An inheritance from an unknown uncle? Her mind spun with the implications. Before she could formulate a response, Oliver handed her an envelope. "Inside are the keys and the address of the property. When you feel ready, you can visit it. I am available for any questions or legal assistance you may need." With those words, Oliver gave a respectful nod and departed, leaving Abigail alone with her thoughts and the envelope in her hands. For a long moment, Abigail stood still, staring at the space where Oliver had been. The unexpected news cast a shadow of mystery over her routine. She wondered who this Uncle Franklin was, and what kind of life he had led to end up leaving his inheritance to a niece who barely knew he existed. With a sigh, Abigail tucked the envelope into her purse, promising herself she would investigate this story. But for now, she needed to process the strange turn her life had taken. As she walked back to her front door, Abigail couldn't help but feel a mix of anxiety and curiosity. What did this house in the countryside hold? What secrets were hidden within the walls left behind by Franklin? These questions echoed in her mind, marking the beginning of an unexpected journey. After the unexpected encounter with Oliver, the lawyer, Abigail found herself lost in thought as she settled onto her living room sofa. With the envelope containing the keys and the address of the country house resting on the coffee table, she decided to seek more information about this mysterious relative. Abigail thought about family members who might have known something about Franklin. She picked up the phone and began a series of calls, trying to piece together the forgotten history of this uncle. One by one, the calls seemed to lead to more questions than answers. Frustrated but not discouraged, she remembered one last resort: the husband of a deceased aunt, who might have known Franklin. "Hello, it's Abigail. I was trying to find out more about a distant relative, Franklin. Did you happen to know him?" Abigail's voice conveyed a mixture of hope and caution. On the other end of the line, an aged but warm voice replied, "Ah, Franklin. Yes, I remember him. Haven't seen him in decades. He was a rather reserved man, you know. Didn't share much about his life. He was married, lived with his wife in a house in the country. But after that, we completely lost touch. I don't know what happened to him, the distant relative continued, his words painting a picture of a man wrapped up in his own world. Abigail thanked him for the information and hung up, a sense of gratitude mixed with deep reflection about the inheritance she had received. The inheritance of a house in the country from an almost ghost-like relative seemed both a stroke of luck and a mystery to be solved. She pondered the unexpected fortune of receiving such a property. For many, it would be like winning the lottery without even buying a ticket. However, for Abigail, this inheritance brought with it a series of questions and responsibilities. Her life was intrinsically linked to her work, a dedication that often went beyond reasonable limits in the eyes of family and friends. Abigail had never prioritized seeking a romantic relationship or motherhood, choosing instead to invest every available moment in her career. Now, at 40, without a husband or children, she found satisfaction in her professional achievements, a reality that many around her criticized, but which for her was the source of her completeness. The news of the inheritance forced Abigail to confront the possibility of a change, even if temporary, in her carefully structured routine. She pondered the effort and time required to manage this new property, questioning the feasibility of visiting the house given her always packed schedule. Abigail's reflection on the inheritance and Uncle Franklin's life served as a mirror, making her question the rigidity of her own existence and whether there was something more beyond work that could bring a new dimension to her life. Still, this introspection didn't change the fact that, for the time being, her professional responsibilities took precedence, postponing any decisions about the country house to an uncertain future. In the months following the unexpected inheritance from Franklin, Abigail found herself immersed in her work responsibilities, allowing the existence of the country house to become a mere memory, almost a distant fantasy. Her life continued to revolve around deadlines, meetings, and career goals, with little room for any deviation. The idea of visiting the property never found fertile ground in her busy schedule, remaining an indefinitely postponed idea. One day, after long hours of work that tested her physical and mental limits, Abigail found herself in the surreal situation of driving home in a state of profound exhaustion. The exhaustion was so intense that, in an alarming moment, her body refused to obey. Unable to press the brake or turn the steering wheel, Abigail found herself at the mercy of fate as her car, at a reduced speed, headed inexorably towards another vehicle. The impact was light, but enough to cause a commotion. The driver of the other car, a man with a concerned expression, ran to her, immediately noticing her weakened condition. Abigail was paralyzed, breaking out in a cold sweat, a state that made the stranger act quickly, calling an ambulance. At the hospital, Abigail underwent a battery of tests while trying to process what had happened. Her body and mind, always so reliable, had failed her at the most unexpected moment. She anxiously awaited the results, pondering the repercussions of the accident, when the man whose car she had hit appeared by her side. "Hi, I'm Lucas. How are you feeling?" His voice was gentle, concerned, but without a trace of accusation or irritation. Abigail looked at him, realizing for the first time who the owner of the other car was. "I'm better, thank you. And I'm so sorry about your car. I'll make sure to cover all the damages," she said, her voice weak but firm in her intention. Lucas smiled slightly, a gesture of kindness that seemed out of place in the sterile hospital environment. "Don't worry about the car. The important thing is that you're okay. These things happen, and cars can be fixed. People are more important." After exchanging a few more words, Lucas said goodbye, leaving Abigail alone with her thoughts. This unexpected encounter and the accident itself served as a rude awakening. For the first time in a long time, Abigail was forced to reconsider her priorities. The constant dedication to work had taken its toll, manifesting in a physical and undeniable way. The incident, though frightening, opened Abigail's eyes to the need for balance in her life. She began to contemplate the possibility that there was more to life than just work, a realization that made her reflect on the country house she had inherited. Perhaps, she thought, it was time to take a break, to explore this legacy left by an unknown relative. After the scare and the eye-opening experience at the hospital, Abigail found herself sitting across from a doctor who, after reviewing a series of tests, confirmed that physically she was fine. However, the conversation that followed revealed a diagnosis Abigail never expected to receive: a burnout crisis, also known as professional exhaustion syndrome. "The tests are normal, which is great news," the doctor began, adjusting his glasses as he looked at Abigail with a concerned expression. "But based on what you've told me, I believe what you experienced was a burnout crisis. Are you familiar with the term?" Abigail nodded, a sense of disbelief washing over her. She had read articles and seen reports, but always thought of it as something distant, that happened to other people, not her. "Yes, I know what it is. But I never imagined. I always thought I could handle the pressure," she admitted, her voice low. "It's a common trap for dedicated, hard-working people," the doctor empathized, his voice firm but gentle. "You need to take some time for yourself, step away from work for a while. A trip, if possible, could do wonders for you." Returning home by bus, a sense of exhaustion overcame Abigail so completely that she fell asleep almost immediately upon arriving. Hours later, upon waking, the reality of her burnout became undeniable. Feeling the need to share her experience, she called a close friend. "You won't believe what happened," Abigail began, recounting the accident, the hospital visit, and the doctor's diagnosis. "Abigail, you need a break, you know? A change of scenery, something peaceful. Traveling to the countryside and connecting with nature, it works miracles for the mind," her friend suggested, echoing the doctor's advice. It was then that the memory of the house inherited from Franklin came to Abigail's mind. Perhaps this was the perfect opportunity, not only to recover but also to assess the property that, until that moment, had remained a mystery in her life. Granted 2 months of medical leave from work, Abigail found herself facing a previously unthinkable prospect: a long period away from her work routine. With a mix of anxiety and expectation, she bought bus tickets to the small town in the countryside where the house was located. During the journey, Abigail watched the landscapes unfold outside her window. Green fields, dense forests, and occasional patches of wildflowers captured her attention in a way the concrete jungle of the city never could. Each tree, each flower seemed to invite her to forget her worries for a moment, offering a glimpse of peace and natural beauty. As the bus moved forward, Abigail felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in a long time. The possibility of escaping, even temporarily, the constant pressure of her job to explore the inheritance left by an unknown relative became a source of curiosity and, perhaps, healing. When Abigail finally arrived at the house she had inherited from Franklin, a distant uncle whose existence was unknown to her until recently, the first impression was one of pure surprise. The residence stood majestically in its old style, with an attic that promised forgotten stories and a basement that added a touch of mystery. Although the absence of inhabitants had allowed dust to accumulate here and there, the structure of the house appeared impressively well preserved. As Abigail explored the interior, watching the afternoon light filter through the dusty windows, creating a spectacle of shadows and light, she realized the task of cleaning wouldn't be as daunting as she had imagined. There was a feeling of home in that house, a feeling she hadn't expected to find but that welcomed her from the first moment. It wasn't long before the new owner received her first visitor. Mrs. Miller, the nearest neighbor, was an elderly lady who approached with a mixture of curiosity and nostalgia. "You must be Abigail, Franklin's niece, right?" Her voice carried the softness of years and a hint of anxiety, perhaps due to the novelty Abigail's arrival represented. Chatting with Mrs. Miller, Abigail began to piece together a clearer picture of Franklin. He had married young, living in this large house with his wife until, after 2 decades of marriage, she left him. "He was a different man after she left," Mrs. Miller shared, her distant eyes reflecting the memory of the transformation she had observed in her neighbor. "He became reclusive, hardly received visitors. I myself only came by occasionally for a quick chat, but he was always kind." The cause of Franklin's death, a heart attack, according to the paramedics who responded to the call that fateful morning, didn't surprise Abigail, considering he was quite elderly. However, learning these details from Mrs. Miller added layers to the story of the house and the legacy left to her. After saying goodbye to Mrs. Miller, Abigail dedicated herself to cleaning the house with an energy she didn't know she possessed. She moved from room to room, clearing away the dust and the accumulated years of solitude until the house began to feel inhabited again. There was something therapeutic in the act of cleaning. Each gesture seemed to sweep away not only the physical dust but also the weight she had been carrying without realizing it. As night fell, with the house finally breathing an air of care and attention, Abigail felt a kind of tiredness she hadn't experienced in a long time. It wasn't the mental exhaustion from her city job, but a physical fatigue accompanied by a strange sense of accomplishment. Abigail's move to the house inherited from Franklin had brought a peace and contentment she hadn't felt in a long time. Life in the country, with its slower pace and proximity to nature, turned out to be surprisingly pleasant. Throughout the week, Abigail found herself contemplating the possibility of leaving the big city and settling there permanently. However, the idea of abandoning her career, the center of her life for so long, seemed too radical a step. She loved her job, despite everything. On one of these contemplative days, while exploring the grounds adjacent to the house, Abigail noticed something peculiar. The plants and grass were neatly trimmed, and there were signs of recent planting. Curious and a little surprised, as the property should have been untended before her arrival, she decided to seek answers from Mrs. Miller, the neighbor who seemed to know so much about Franklin and the house's history. "Mrs. Miller, have you been taking care of Franklin's garden?" she asked when she found her, curiosity evident in her voice. Mrs. Miller smiled, a gesture that bore the marks of time. "Dear, sometimes I did, yes, but it's been quite a while since I last set foot there. Maybe nature is just taking its course," she replied, leaving Abigail even more intrigued. Night arrived, bringing with it a tranquility Abigail had learned to appreciate. Sleeping with the window open, allowing the cool country breeze to dance through the curtains while she admired the moon and stars, became one of her favorite routines. This connection with nature was something almost non-existent in her city life. However, this tranquility was shattered when, on one specific night, Abigail woke with a start to strange noises echoing through the house. Heart racing, she grabbed a piece of wood, preparing to confront whatever had invaded her refuge. The noises continued for a while, an eerie mystery in the silence of the night, until, as suddenly as they began, they ceased. The following morning found Abigail tired and worried. A conversation with Mrs. Miller about the nightly noises brought momentary relief. "Old houses tend to creak with temperature changes at night," Mrs. Miller explained, laughing gently at Abigail's concern. "It's probably just the wood settling." Despite the logical explanation, Abigail couldn't completely shake off the unease. The following nights were marked by more noises, each feeding the restlessness growing in her heart. The affection she felt for the house and the countryside now confronted hesitation and fear. The idea of selling the property began to seem like an increasingly viable option. She considered herself a brave person, but the possibility, however remote and rationally improbable, of a ghost in the house disturbed her. Sometimes Abigail laughed at herself for considering such a superstition. Yet, she couldn't deny that the nightly noises had added a layer of mystery and unease to her stay in the country. This mix of feelings left Abigail torn between the desire to stay and the urge to return to the predictable safety of her old urban life. After a series of unsettling nights, the mysterious noises that had disturbed Abigail's sleep finally ceased, allowing her some much-needed rest. Her curiosity about Franklin's life, however, remained ignited, leading her to search the house for any trace that might shed light on her enigmatic uncle's past. The attic and basement were meticulously explored, but the absence of photographs or personal documents was notable. It was as if Franklin had left little or no trace of his existence beyond the memories shared by Mrs. Miller. One evening, Abigail's determination to stay connected to her professional world led her to simultaneously plug her computer, cell phone, and a lamp into the same outlet. The shock upon seeing the amount of accumulated work was immediate. It was evident her colleagues were leaving her more than her fair share of responsibilities. Immersed in reports and correspondence, Abigail worked late into the night, succumbing to exhaustion only when fatigue made it impossible to continue. Her sleep, however, was abruptly interrupted by a small spark escaping from the overloaded outlet, starting a fire in the room. Initially oblivious to the danger, Abigail was jolted awake by the explosion of her lamp, the bulb shattering amidst a room already filling with smoke. Disoriented and weakened by smoke inhalation, she barely managed to get out of bed, falling to the floor and crawling towards the exit, her voice failing as she tried to cry for help. It was then, through the toxic haze and confusion, that Abigail perceived the presence of a figure. It looked like a boy, an almost ethereal figure in the unfolding calamity. Before she could fully comprehend the situation, darkness enveloped her in a veil of unconsciousness. Abigail awoke outdoors, the dawn light revealing the concerned outlines of neighbors running towards her. Others were mobilizing in frantic efforts to contain the fire, which fortunately had been limited to her bedroom. The community had gathered with impressive efficiency and solidarity. But amidst the relief of being alive and the gratitude for her neighbors' efforts, one question remained unanswered. How had she been carried out of the house? Speculations ranged from the swift action of some heroic neighbor to more mystical suggestions, but no concrete account emerged to explain her rescue. The mystery of that night, like the previous noises, added an even deeper layer to the enigma that was Franklin's house. After the fire that nearly cost her life, Abigail found herself alone in the house again, facing the challenge of restoring the damaged room. With determination, she began the arduous cleaning process, removing the burned furniture and scraping the scorched paint from the walls. What seemed like a simple repair task, however, quickly turned into a surprising and somewhat terrifying discovery. Noticing irregularities in the wall, Abigail saw several hidden holes beneath layers of paint. Driven by curiosity and armed with a hammer, she began to break down the fragile part of the wall, revealing a small hidden corridor. Her heart pounded as she explored the new space, a staircase leading to a furnished, functional room, complete with a bathroom and a makeshift kitchen. The shock came when Abigail observed food in the refrigerator and crumbs on the table, clear indicators that someone had been there recently. The discovery of a tunnel leading to the barn offered an explanation for how this person came and went undetected. Fear and surprise mingled in her heart. She was sharing the house with a stranger without even knowing it. As she pondered whether to flee and never return, Abigail heard footsteps approaching. With no time to find a hiding place, she found herself face to face with the source of her surprise. A boy appearing to be about 14 years old, the same one she vaguely remembered seeing before passing out during the fire. The encounter was marked by mutual screams of surprise. The boy, as frightened as she was, stopped abruptly, eyes wide as he recognized her. For a moment, both stood motionless, sizing each other up in the silence that followed the initial shock. "Who are you?" Abigail managed to ask, her voice trembling but firm, the hammer still in her hand indicating her readiness to defend herself if necessary. My name is Daniel," the boy replied, lowering his head as if expecting a reprimand. "I didn't mean to scare anyone. I have nowhere else to go." Daniel. A name that sounded so common, yet so full of mystery in that context. The revelation that Daniel had been sheltering in the house without Abigail's knowledge brought a whirlwind of emotions. There was fear, yes, but also a touch of compassion for the boy, apparently lost and alone. As Abigail and Daniel talked, the barriers of fear and distrust between them began to crumble. Listening to the young man's story, Abigail felt a mixture of admiration and compassion. The confirmation that Daniel had been her savior during the fire only increased her gratitude, and the unexpected bond beginning to form between them. "So it was you who saved me from that fire?" Abigail asked, still impressed by the revelation. Daniel, a little shy but with a glimmer of pride in his eyes, nodded. "Yes. I was in the barn when I saw the fire. I didn't think twice before running to help." Abigail listened intently as Daniel told his story, a tale of overcoming hardship and resilience. He described how life with his dysfunctional family had become unbearable, leading him to run away and eventually live on the streets. Franklin's barn had become his temporary refuge until Franklin himself discovered him there. "Franklin was incredibly kind to me," Daniel recalled. "He fed me, and after hearing my story, he offered me a place to live. He showed me that hidden area, saying I could stay there as long as I needed." Abigail was moved by Franklin's generosity, a man she barely knew but whose actions continued to impact her life in unexpected ways. The revelation that the hidden area had been used by servants in the past added another layer to the house's history. a complex past full of untold stories. Daniel also shared his passion for gardening, an activity that provided him comfort and a sense of purpose. Taking care of the garden made me feel like I was contributing somehow, you know? Even if nobody knew it was me behind it. After hearing Daniel's entire story, Abigail felt compelled to help the young man, just as Franklin had done. She prepared a meal, and the two dined together in the house's kitchen, a moment of companionship and sharing. During dinner, Abigail reflected on the twists and turns her life had taken since arriving at the house. You know, Daniel, I never imagined coming here would change my life in so many ways. And now, meeting you and hearing your story, I feel like maybe there's a greater purpose for me being here. Daniel, somewhat surprised by Abigail's openness and kindness, smiled shyly. I really didn't expect to find someone like you here. I was prepared to run away again, but now, I feel like maybe I don't have to. Abigail's decision to give Daniel not just access but the freedom to make the house a home marked the beginning of a new phase in both their lives. Aware of the need to repair the structural damage caused by her discovery of Daniel's hiding place, Abigail hired a mason to close the hole in the bedroom and the secret entrance through the barn. The installation of an external door specifically for Daniel symbolized his acceptance and welcome into the house, no longer as an intruder, but as part of the family beginning to form there. Daniel, in turn, showed his gratitude in ways that went beyond words. He took responsibility for the garden, kept the house clean, and occasionally prepared breakfast, gestures that reflected his appreciation and respect for Abigail. Abigail's concern for Daniel's education led her to inquire about his studies. The boy's negative response, he wasn't studying, set her next goal in motion, ensuring Daniel could resume his education. Abigail's determination to see Daniel thrive was palpable, and she knew schooling would be a fundamental step in that process. On a particularly productive day, while helping Daniel reorganize his space, Abigail made an intriguing discovery. Hidden photo albums revealing unknown aspects of Franklin's life. The constant presence of a woman in the photos indicated she was Franklin's wife. The search for answers led Abigail back to Mrs. Miller, the neighbor whose knowledge of Franklin had proven valuable before. Mrs. Miller's surprise upon seeing the photos only deepened the mystery, suggesting untold chapters in the story of Franklin and the house. Looking at the photos, Mrs. Miller said she didn't know who the woman next to Franklin was. The woman in the photo was black, but Franklin's wife had been a white, blonde woman. All this added more mystery to his life. Daniel provided his mother's address so Abigail could speak with her and obtain the necessary documents for him to return to school. Abigail found Daniel's mother's name somewhat unusual. Stella. She also thought the woman looked a bit older than she imagined for the mother of a teenager, indicating Stella might have given birth to Daniel around age 40. Abigail's interaction with Stella, Daniel's distant mother, was a chapter in itself. Stella's apathy towards her son and her readiness to hand over all necessary documentation to Abigail, including a power of attorney, were revealing. This gesture not only paved the way for Daniel's education but also solidified Abigail's role as his de facto guardian. Abigail embraced the responsibility of ensuring Daniel could start studying not as a burden, but as a mission. The gratitude she felt for having her life saved by Daniel transformed into a deep commitment to support the young man on his path to a better future. One quiet afternoon, with the sun already dipping towards the horizon, Abigail found Daniel in a state of deep reflection, his gaze lost in thoughts that clearly weighed on him. Abigail's intuition, sharpened by their time living together and the growing bond between them, signaled that Daniel held a confession within him, a secret struggling to find its voice. "Daniel, what's bothering you? You seem distant today," Abigail inquired, her voice tinged with a maternal concern that had blossomed since their lives intertwined under the same roof. Daniel, staring at the ground beneath his feet as if he could find the right words there, finally looked up at Abigail. "There's something I never told you, about the day Franklin died," he began, his words heavy with the weight of a long-held secret. "I was there with him when he started feeling unwell." Daniel's words were interrupted by an emotion-laden pause, an internal struggle visible on his youthful face. "I called the ambulance, but when they were arriving, I ran away. I was afraid they'd somehow think it was my fault," he confessed, the fear of wrongful judgment still vivid in his voice. Abigail's reaction was immediate and full of empathy. She moved closer to Daniel, offering a hug that sought to convey safety and understanding. "Daniel, you did everything you could. Franklin's death wasn't your fault." "He was an elderly man, and these things unfortunately happen," she assured him, her words seeking to alleviate the burden Daniel carried in his young heart. With Daniel's revelation echoing in her mind, Abigail felt compelled to delve once more into the mysteries left by Franklin. It was then, among the forgotten belongings of the man who once inhabited that house, that she discovered a series of letters. These letters contained words of eternal love addressed to a woman named Amelia, a love that defied the social and racial conventions of the time. The letters narrated a story of forbidden love between Franklin, the son of a wealthy family, and Amelia, a maid in the grand house that Abigail now called home. Franklin's parents had found him kissing Amelia in the servants' area and were furious. They fired Amelia and sealed off the servants' quarters, moving them to another part of the house. They sealed off the lower part and also the upper part where the staircase was, turning it into a bedroom. This bedroom was where Abigail found the entrance to the servants' area where Daniel lived. They said that this way, Franklin wouldn't be able to have affairs with any other maids. However, driven by an unbreakable love, Franklin created a secret path, a tunnel, that allowed him and Amelia to meet away from the judging eyes of his family and society, a testament to the power of love over imposed racial barriers. The revelation contained in Franklin's last letters unveiled a truth Abigail could never have imagined, a story of love and loss so profound it transcended generations. Amelia, the woman Franklin had fallen deeply in love with, became the center of a plot that shaped the destiny of several lives. When Abigail learned that Amelia had become pregnant and, due to Franklin's lack of courage to confront his parents, she had disappeared, a veil of sadness covered her understanding of the house's past. Franklin, bound by family expectations, married another woman, a loveless union arranged by his parents. The love of his life remained Amelia, and the fruit of their love, a child he never had the chance to know. The woman he married eventually asked for a divorce, a separation Franklin received with indifference, as his heart belonged elsewhere. In the last letter sent to Amelia, Franklin expressed his eternal regret for not running away with her, for not living the life beside his true love and their daughter. The mention of the daughter's name was the key that unlocked the mystery of Franklin's lineage. With her heart racing and mind turbulent, Abigail, driven by the need to confirm her suspicions, turned to Daniel. "Daniel, do you know your grandmother's name?" she asked, her voice trembling with the intensity of the moment. "Yes, her name is Amelia," Daniel replied, not understanding the magnitude of the revelation he had just made. Abigail could hardly believe it. Franklin had mentioned the name Stella in the letter. He chose it for his daughter, connecting the dots of a story that seemed destined to remain incomplete until that moment. Curious, Abigail asked Daniel about the conversation they had moments before Franklin fell ill. Daniel revealed they were talking about his family, about his mother and grandmother. Understanding hit Abigail like lightning. On the day of his death, Franklin had discovered that Daniel was his grandson. The emotion of this recognition, after years of separation and regret, was so overwhelming that his heart couldn't take it. Sharing her discoveries with Daniel, Abigail revealed the intricate web of connections linking them to the past. Daniel, absorbing every word, then revealed that his grandmother Amelia was still alive, residing in a nursing home. The story of Franklin, Amelia, Stella, and now Daniel was a rich and complex tapestry of love, choices, and consequences that spanned time. Abigail felt a mixture of sadness for Franklin's lost love and hope, because there was still time for Daniel to reconnect with his grandmother, to heal the wounds of the past, and perhaps find a new beginning for his family. The journey to the nursing home where Amelia resided was filled with anticipation and emotion for Daniel and Abigail. Upon arrival, they found Amelia, an elderly lady whose vibrant spirit contradicted her advanced age. The reunion between Amelia and Daniel, her grandson whom she hadn't seen in years, was a moment of pure emotion. With a warm hug and words of blessing, Amelia welcomed Daniel, a gesture that sealed the importance of their meeting. Abigail, witnessing this reunion, took the opportunity to introduce herself and explain the reason for their visit. The mention of Franklin and an old photograph showing Amelia alongside the love of her life brought tears to the elderly woman's eyes. "He was the great love of my life. But he made his choice," Amelia said between sobs. "I had a daughter to raise, and I made mine. Unfortunately, our paths weren't easy. Stella grew up rebellious and distanced herself from me. But now I have my dear grandson by my side." Inspired by Amelia's strength and resilience, Abigail proposed taking her to visit the house that had been the stage for so many shared memories and dreams with Franklin. Upon arrival, the emotional impact of the visit was immense for Amelia, whose eyes filled with tears upon seeing the secret place where she and Franklin had experienced their forbidden love. "It could have been different," she murmured, the what-ifs hanging in the air. Noticing Amelia's melancholy, Abigail intervened with words of encouragement. "Now you have the chance to create a new story in this house." A smile formed on Amelia's lips, a spark of hope igniting in her eyes. As Abigail's 2-month leave neared its end, she faced a significant decision. In a gesture of generosity that transcended expectations, Abigail handed the keys to the house to Daniel, telling Amelia to live there with him. "This house is yours by right," she declared, recognizing the profound connection between Amelia, Daniel, and the home Franklin had left behind. Amelia and Daniel's gratitude was palpable, their words unable to fully express their feelings of appreciation. Abigail, in turn, felt filled with a sense of fulfillment, knowing she was making the right choice. She understood that by handing over the house to Amelia and Daniel, she wasn't just passing on a material asset but also providing them the opportunity for healing and rebuilding family ties worn down by time and circumstance. After leaving behind the quiet country life and returning to the bustle of the big city, Abigail saw her existence take an unexpected turn. A call from Lucas, the man whose car she had hit years ago, marked the beginning of a series of events that would irrevocably transform her life. Abigail's apologies for the incident were met with laughter and a casual promise to sort things out later. A detail that seemed insignificant at the time but foreshadowed the start of something new and exciting. 6 years passed since that incident, and in that interval, Abigail's life intertwined with Lucas's in a way she could never have predicted. The car accident, an event that could have been forgotten as a passing inconvenience, served as the starting point for a love that blossomed between them, culminating in marriage. Together, they adopted Vanessa, a charming girl whose arrival completed their family in a way neither had expected. Life went on, and the family decided to visit the house in the countryside, a place filled with memories and significance for all of them. Daniel, now 20, had made the house his own, sharing it with his girlfriend, Jessica. Young but determined, they had ambitious plans for marriage and transforming the property into a large farm, leveraging Daniel's knowledge of agronomy and Jessica's veterinary skills. The reunion was marked by a festive lunch where conversations flowed freely, filled with memories and laughter that echoed through the house's corridors, reliving the good times shared there. Amelia's absence, who had passed away, was felt by everyone, but there was solace in the memory that she spent her final years surrounded by the love of Daniel, a grandson she rediscovered and with whom she could share precious moments. In a moment of reflection, Daniel and Abigail found themselves looking at the photo of Amelia beside Franklin. It was impossible not to think about the twists and turns of life, about the choices made and the paths that intertwine. In that instant, both felt a sense of peace, an understanding that somehow Amelia and Franklin were now together, in a place where the love they shared remained eternal and unwavering.